Good evening. Driving along and about to have my Friday night, so you'll just have to put up with this evening video with weird lighting and me driving. Sorry. Not sorry. Okay. Anger. Now, right now, alright, modern society tells you it's not okay. In fact, they say it's never okay to be angry. I hope my audio is right, too. But anyways, they say it's never okay to be angry. It's pretty much what's being promoted right now. Well, I disagree with that. I think that's actually completely wrong. As a alpha male or female, as a leader, sometimes it is important to get angry. When is that? When is it important? When is it appropriate? Well, when faced with an injustice, anger is the appropriate emotion to have. There's this presentation that exists in the self-help world as well as the modern feel-good snowflake world that being angry is never an appropriate emotion. It's always in this idea that anger is always masking some other emotion. So for example, let's say a family member does something, creates an injustice for me, does an injustice towards me, well, you're really hurt that happened and you're sad and you're covering it with anger. No, I disagree. The injustice causes the anger. You may be sad also because you were, let's say, betrayed by that family member. Let's say your family member betrays you and, you're sad that the family member did that, but you're also angry at the injustice of it. And if you're going to stand up against injustice, that's where anger happens. Anger is causing you to do that. So anger is sometimes a good and appropriate answer to a problem. All right? So don't listen to the modern thing that says, the modern society and snowflake culture that tells you that anger is never okay. Wrong. Anger is appropriate when there is an injustice, and in order for you to stand up against an injustice and feel strongly about that, that's where anger comes to play as an emotion. And it's a real emotion. I mean, you can't say that sadness is not okay or that happiness is not okay. So why would you say that anger is not okay? Now, how do you handle anger, though? That's another story, all right? So as a strong person, you have emotional self-control. That's the difference between somebody who gets angry who's weak and somebody who gets angry who is a strong person, right? Someone who's weak is going to do one of two things. They're going to pretend the anger doesn't exist. They're going to avoid it. And then they're going to do something else. It'll manifest itself into another behavior that's essential, that could be worse, actually, than just getting angry and responding to that anger. So, in other words, I could be angry at somebody and say, hey, you know what? I didn't fucking appreciate how you treated me there, what you said, or how you dealt with this problem. And we need to talk about this because I'm not tolerating that kind of behavior. All right? That would be responding appropriately to a particular injustice. Versus smiling and pretending like nothing's wrong and asking that person, well, how's your family? Oh, good. Well, you have a good weekend. And then maybe turn around and then tell your boss or manager that this person did this injustice, or reporting this person to, let's say, a licensing board if you're like a real estate agent like I am. These are things this is the passive-aggressive things that are promoted nowadays. Passive aggressiveness is promoted as being okay, whereas whereas recognizing anger and responding in a direct way is considered not okay. And I'm here to tell you that that's wrong. I would most rather have somebody confront me and tell me that they're pissed off at me, and here's why, and let's deal with the problem directly, than do something more harmful to me, like go behind my back and talk about me to somebody else in a way that would be harmful, or or try to report or do some kind of administrative violence towards me versus just confronting me directly, right? So if you're, an alpha in your world, you're going to confront people directly. You're going to respond appropriately to those feelings of anger and injustice. Now, one thing you need to be careful of is you need to be careful, make sure that it's a real injustice. So some people will have this anger and then they'll justify anger later. They'll make up, they're really not, their anger's not justifiable, but they will, make things up, all right, and pretend that, convey that their anger was justified when it's just not justified at all. So if you're like, I don't know, tearing into your girlfriend because she didn't respond to your text fast enough, and she had a completely reasonable reason for not responding to your text, like, I don't know, she's working or in appointments, you're wrong in that, and then having, an angry response to that is not an appropriate emotion. So if you evaluate that feeling of anger and you find out that there's no injustice behind it, now the anger as an emotion is inappropriate, it's misplaced. So then you need to do some inventory and work on yourself and figure out what is causing that emotional response and that inappropriate emotional response, and then how can I fix that problem, right? So that's something you need to be careful of, because there's people who respond in extreme ways to anger and they're blaming everybody else for that problem, and obviously that's not okay. And then the other thing is you need to respond. You need to have emotional control and respond appropriately to the injustice. So just because you're angry, it doesn't give you the right to smash somebody's face in or be verbally abusive or explode and break things. These are things that are inappropriate responses to that angry feeling. Maybe. I say maybe because, look, there's also another myth out there to say that violence is never okay. Well, that's wrong. I'm not a pacifist, and quite honestly, if you're an alpha in your world, you're not a pacifist either, all right? Because let's say somebody is sexually assaulting your significant other. What are you going to do, stand there and evaluate the problem and try to talk them out of it? No, I think that maybe responding, if somebody's going to try to, let's say, kidnap my son and pull him into a van, violence would be the appropriate response to that. You know what I'm saying? And so anger is going to stimulate, that response to this injustice that's happening. And of course, violence might be that appropriate response. But if somebody wrongs me or, verbally wrongs me or is dishonest to me or does some sort of injustice, and then I just beat them up for it, well, that's not okay. You know what I'm saying? So it has to be an appropriate response. And the reason for inappropriate responses are a lack of emotional self-control. So that is when a weak person has angry feelings, they respond by ignoring them, and then not recognizing anger for what it is, and then doing something else, passive aggressive, that is more harmful, or they respond inappropriately to that anger because they don't have the emotional self-control to respond the right way. So, exploding on your girlfriend and screaming at her, honestly, maybe that is the right answer. Depends on the injustice, but generally speaking, probably not the right answer, right? And so, that's where, you need to be able to not, society is telling you that anger is never okay. Well, that is completely wrong. And if you're trying to go with that, you're in danger of always having an anger issue. People who are passive aggressive and pretend like they're never upset have an anger issue because they're harming others through administrative violence or passive aggressiveness, and they're not admitting to the anger that's behind that. People who don't have emotional self-control also are harming others in their relationships. So you don't want to be either of those people. At least if I recognize that anger is a real emotion and an appropriate response to injustice or to something, to me or somebody else being wronged, then I can work on what that appropriate response, that the action, the appropriate action is to that emotion. Instead of pretending the emotion is never okay, I can say, well, what is my appropriate way? How do I have better emotional self-control? How do I react to this anger in a more appropriate manner? So, good thing about anger again is that it stimulates standing up and actioning against injustice. So if you're fighting against injustice, whether it's physical fight, people who are in the services, myself, for example, on a deployment or something, if I have to get into a physical fight or a gunfight because of injustices that exist in the world, guess what? Anger is okay in my book. But, maybe you're doing a different kind of fight, fighting against I'm going to get into some work fighting against human trafficking here shortly, and even fighting against injustices against veterans and some of the problems in the world. I mean, this stimulates action, and so being a little bit angry about some of the things that happen out there and wanting to put a stop to it, that is very much an alpha male or female trait that's worthwhile to have. So don't listen to society. Don't listen to the snowflakes that tell you anger is never okay. Anger is just fine if it's an appropriate emotion to an injustice, and then how you action that anger. If your actionable response is appropriate, then anger is okay in my book, and yours as well. So thanks for tuning in and putting up with my crazy driving video as I drive to having an awesome Friday night. So you guys have a great Friday night too, and see you next time.